Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, Sarah. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You haven't been on the podcast in a while. How have you been?
I've been great, as you know, except I'm on because I'm so excited about this guest. Dr. Jack Kruse is awesome.
Yeah, definitely one of the highlights of doing this podcast so far.
Oh my gosh, he is so great. I want him to be my doctor, and I want to be functioning at his level.
Yeah, so we're going to have a lot of interesting things to talk about. Bitcoin, mitochondria, kind of the relationships between the two, thermodynamics.
Right, health and wealth, the crossroads. And also, I'm kind of excited that now that more people are into the blockchain, we got a new sponsor.
We do, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a great one. I actually saved $20 by getting my dad some stuff, and I used the promo code blockchain.
I did the same for my dad. So
yeah. Now, disclaimer or trigger warning or spoiler alert, I stayed away from the ball-centric stuff. There's a lot of ball talk. I got my dad a nose hair trimmer. Stay on the safe side.
I got my dad the same and also some soap.
Yeah, a little trimming kit.
Okay, so personal hygiene.
Health. Health is coming your way. Well, you know, as you're listening to this, you're about to hear this interview. We just finished it, and I was not able to be a part of it because we have children. They were loud, and I did not want to distract from Dr. Kruse. But I can tell you one thing that I'm going to do right now after hearing that. I was getting goosebumps. I'm not lying. I was even getting verklempt at certain points. But I am going to buy some Bitcoin. I'm also going to be a member of his. I've been following him for a long time, and I've been a fan, and I agree with just about everything that he says, really. But now I really am going to go be a member because my curiosity is even more piqued.
Yeah, he's definitely an inspiring individual. And what do you think about, because I know we've talked about you on the podcast before. You used to be on here more often, but
I miss it.
You kind of experimented a little bit with cryptocurrencies for the last, certainly several months. But before then, I brought up the story about you losing your keys.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
To your wallet.
I experimented with loss.
What have you learned since then, and what do you has Dr. Kruse kind of inspired you? Where are you at on the whole crypto thing?
Well, I got to say, it kind of faded into my background a little bit, but here's one lesson just for all of you out there. Hear me now, please. Write down your keys and put them somewhere. The keys to the wallet. I don't even know how I lost mine. Maybe a kid just pushed a button and poof, there they went. When I think about how much it's worth right now, I want to cry because it's significant and it's just gone. So just take a moment to, have a safe place for backup. So I did learn that. But also from Dr. Kruse, what he says is really, he's going to tell you some stuff that now it makes all the sense in the world. Do I want to be a part of the solution? Do I really want to put my money where my mouth is and be thinking about the long term? So I am going to go buy some Bitcoin right now. And I get the maximalist thing. I get that. I'm not that versed in all of this, but I hear what he's saying.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad you could come back. And thanks for doing the artwork. It really makes the website and, episodes on Spotify look better.
Gee, thanks.
Got to get you in the NFT world.
Yes, that's
Steve
right.
was talking about that when we started this podcast, and it just kind of went over our heads. I knew there was something to it, but, life gets in the way.
Yes, I kind of would love to have an episode where maybe we can ask Steve to come back on, and he hopefully has the kindness and patience to remind me and maybe walk me through exactly what I need to do, because I'm really seeing the value in that. It's coming to fruition, everything that people had talked about.
Mm-hmm. No, it's valuable. I mean, your journey and my journey, I think other people have learned along with us, and I've certainly got a lot more to learn. And it's just been a good journey. We're getting a lot of more reach, getting more downloads. We're getting more interesting guests like Dr. Kruse and more to come. So I guess we should probably just let him talk.
Let the man talk. He's got such valuable things to say.
It's my great pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Jack Kruse to the podcast. Dr. Kruse is a respected neurosurgeon and CEO of Kruse Longevity Center, a health and wellness company dedicated to helping patients avoid the healthcare burdens typically encountered as one ages. He's a member of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons, the Congress of Neurological Surgeons, and Age Management Medicine Group. He has helped pioneer a totally new medical field, quantum mitochondrial health, which has allowed him to help tens of thousands of patients and members to reverse chronic diseases and achieve optimal health. Building on his deep medical expertise, he's also built a vibrant community dedicated to helping people build critical thinking skills and to be able to see the world as it really is, challenging the myths and false conventional wisdom that prop up our health system, our financial system, our media, and our governments. So there's a lot of just fascinating information that we can cover today, but I want to welcome you to the podcast, Dr. Jack Kruse.
Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
This is really, really, like I said, a big deal for me. You know, the intersection of health, decentralized finance, cryptocurrencies, blockchain. You know, we've talked about DeFi. We've talked about all the cryptocurrencies, some of the blockchain projects, but never before have we had a guest like you who can really just sum up the problems and the potential solutions. So,
well, it's been on my radar for a long time, to be honest with you. I mean, to give the audience a background, the big jump off point for me on the biology side occurred about 16 years ago when I realized that modern medicine was making the mistake of not realizing that all living things are built in a decentralized world called nature. And nature is run by a mathematical program called quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics has a lot of really queer things associated with it, which I'm sure you know about, Nathan. But one of the big ones is that there is no cause and effect quantum mechanically. Everything is based on probable cause or probabilities. That was formalized in the mathematics of not only Einstein, but really Werner Heisenberg, who came up with the uncertainty principle. And the reason why, some of your listeners may find that this is kind of a weird jumping off point to discuss this, but the reason why I found this fascinating is because, you know, in the world of medicine, that the be-all, end-all, the gold standard in medicine is the randomized controlled clinical trial, which is where we take 1 million people, put them through a gauntlet of an experiment, and look for the output. And if you think about that, that actually is a cause and effect type of way of looking at the world. And I thought to myself, does that mean that there's a lot of truths that are actually masquerading as fallacies in medicine? And it turned out that question, you know, asking something that you fundamentally don't believe, because I was a huge believer in randomized controlled clinical trials at that time. But asking that question caused me to jump down the rabbit hole of centralized networks and then versus decentralized networks. And when I realized that everything alive, whether it be a plant, a bacteria, or a complex organism like a mammal or a human, is based on decentralized mathematics, I started to look in other areas, you know, all of our planet, what was decentralized. And it turns out there's really only one manufactured decentralized platform. And it turns out that is Bitcoin. And when I realized that, I was like, this means at some level, to me, fundamentally, that health and wealth have to be linked. And the obvious answer was found pretty quickly when I realized that the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is actually medical costs. So it became pretty obvious to me that our wealth, our life raft, how well it's filled with disposable income, actually can predict better health. Now, it's not axiomatic. It doesn't mean that you can't be poor and still do well. It depends how much your life is lived connected to nature. And, you know, for example, if you're a landscaper and you're constantly outside, you may not have as much money as Jeff Bezos, but you may live a lot longer than Bezos will or a guy like Steve Jobs has. I started to realize that I needed to start exploring this a little bit more. And you know, Ethan, you probably followed me enough that I cut my teeth in this whole podcasting business and medical education business, teaching people mitochondrial medicine, because the mitochondria functionally is a quantum computer of sorts. It actually deciphers environmental signals around us, which come from that decentralized network called Mother Nature. And I decided to look deeper into actually how our money fundamentally works. And when you actually begin to understand money, I think it's a pretty quick rabbit hole where you come to really understand the beauty that was present in Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, what he was functionally trying to do. And when you really read the white paper, especially when you do it through a mitochondriac's eyes like mine are, you see the difficulty adjustment, you see the hash rate. I started to realize that the hash rate correlated with the metabolic rate of an organism. I started to realize that the difficulty adjustment really was the circadian mechanism that was buried inside of Nakamoto's thing. I started to see a lot of correlates between Bitcoin's technology and exactly what Mother Nature is up to as she arranges the atoms in our cells to do the things that it does. So that's kind of how I realized from the biologic perspective that I needed to know a lot more about money, how it links to us, how it links to value, and how it links to time. And that's when I decided to start marrying these two concepts together.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's almost uncanny, the kind of the parallels that nature has. And it's kind of like when you see those images of cities zoomed out at night, and it kind of almost looks like arteries and capillaries, and nature just has a way of organizing itself. And what if we're the agents of nature, kind of unwittingly doing its bidding? Or was Satoshi Nakamoto more of a divinely inspired entity? There's also so many theories about who that person or that group of people was.
I think we're all connected to a global framework. I mean, if you want to be quite frank, I think the quantum field that is Spaceship Earth, every living thing on it is connected to it in some way. And the connection that we have, some people have it stronger than others. I kind of believe that Nakamoto and his group, whoever they were, fundamentally understood what the real problems were. And, the funny thing is, when you were asking me the question, you were talking, I was actually thinking about, and I don't know if you know this story, but I think it's apt. I look at Satoshi Nakamoto and the slime that the Japanese used to rebuild their tunnels in Japan. Do you know that story?
No, I don't.
All right. So the Japanese wanted to put new tunnels in the ground, and they wanted to find out which was the most energy efficient way of doing it. So how did they solve for X? They put green slime down in the sewer system and then watched where it grew. And it turns out where it grew turned out to be the most energy efficient network out there. So remember, green slime doesn't know as much as Ethan or Jack does about a network power, but it turns out that there are some mathematics that nature uses to do this. And I kind of think that Nakamoto tapped into the exact same thing as the slime did. The slime was able to be the main architect of the Japanese underground subway without having any knowledge of quantum mechanics or the mathematics that based it. And I feel that Nakamoto actually did the same thing that the slime did. Everybody wants to believe that he truly got all the little nuances. I don't believe that he did. I believe that he followed quantum thermodynamic principles just like the slime did. And I always make this joke when I do other podcasts when people will talk to me about biology that I don't have to teach lions and hippos quantum mechanics because, they live as nature does. And I'm going to say to you that I think the slime built the Japanese tunnels the same way that Nakamoto built Bitcoin. They just knew. And they followed a thermodynamic design to get it right. Because the one advantage that Nakamoto and his group clearly had is that they knew the problem that money presented. They knew the problems that had to be solved. But the way in which they did it, because, you run a podcast where you talk to a lot of tech guys. Most of the tech guys that are in Silicon Valley look at Bitcoin and go, this is really not that complex at all, a technology. And the funny thing is, I think a lot of them don't realize that that's the whole idea behind nature. It's what Da Vinci said. It's also what Einstein said. Keep it simple, stupid. And it turns out Bitcoin really has a couple of key features. What is it designed to be? A store of value through time, hopefully someday a unit of account, but our government's kind of screwed that up on us because of the way it's taxed. But do I eventually think, if you look at the white paper as a monetary system, that was the solution. I should say that was the problem that he tried to solve. And I think he was effective at doing it. Why? Because he used probable thinking and stochastic math and codified it in code that actually is immutable. And to me, it's very simple. It's not going to, do anything more than it's supposed to do. But I find it almost ironic that probably a lot of people you've had on this podcast in the past don't realize that there's beauty in that, because it doesn't have to do too much. It has a very simple mode of operation. And the problem is that mode of operation has been broken in money for 5,000 years.
That's very well said. And I think that sometimes just being able to zoom out and observe nature has kind of helped me the most when I'm trying to work through something. And I'm sure that this conversation is already blowing a lot of people's minds. This may be their first kind of introduction to you and some of your work. I remember the first time I heard you, I almost kind of got not angry, but like the
should get angry.
Cognitive.
You want to know the truth?
Yeah,
you did. You should, because I'll tell you, when I first realized how my allopathic training in medical school led me down a false path, I was mad for 18 months.
Well, that makes me feel a little better than, even just like I'll think about you almost on a daily basis when I'm walking around the house and looking at my light bulbs, and it's like, man, Dr. Kruse would not approve of. I have a lot of work to do, and it's almost overwhelming. But But
Ethan, I don't want you to think that. It has nothing to do with Uncle Jack. It has everything to do with Mother Nature. Just look at that light bulb and say, is that the light that I was adapted to? That's all you have to do. You know how you stay on the path? Look to nature. The answer is always there. When we talk about, crypto, I tend to spend a lot of time teaching my members about Bitcoin, because I think Bitcoin's the only truly decentralized cryptocurrency out there. Do I follow the other cryptocurrencies? I actually do. Why? Because I have fundamental beliefs about them, what's happening to them. Do I believe they're going to be in a constant state of evolution? And I hope you, as a guy who does podcasting, you pay attention to this with, your wife and your family. I want you to think about the current altcoin market, kind of the way I look at evolution from 65 million years ago. What was the dominant paradigm then will not be the dominant paradigm in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I look at Bitcoin as kind of the base layer, meaning, to be quite frankly, I look at it as a mitochondria. Without the mitochondria, without energy production, you can't build anything in nature, or I think in technology. If you don't have, the proper battery, you can't build a truck that Elon Musk is trying to build. You can't build the vehicles that we're going to need to go to Mars. You can't build the things that we're going to have on the moon. So the story in technology is actually the same story that's present in nature. The interesting thing that people who are in the tech world don't realize is that nature's far in advance of their technology. She's got a 3.8 billion year head start. You guys are in Silicon Valley are working on silicon wafers. And when those silicon wafers touch water, they no longer work. Mother Nature, semiconductors are built out of carbon and they're designed to be wet. That is just how fundamentally different nature and technology is right now. And for humans to think that we're somehow so special, I think when you think about a carbon-based semiconductor that can get wet because it uses topologic insulators to work. Right now, the engineers in Silicon Valley are just waking up to what a topologic insulator can do. They're focused in on on graphene, which happens to be carbon-based, but when they pour water on it, it doesn't work. Why? Turns out the atomic lattice of carbon is actually one of the keys that nature innovated a long time ago. The reason I told you that I look at Bitcoin kind of like a mitochondria, on the biology side, we have a name for a body that has no energy. It's called a cadaver. And you and I right now are talking to each other over technology. Neither one of us are dead. Our brains are working because we're communicating back and forth, complex ideas for people to hear. That whole process starts and ends with my ability and your ability to transform energy from our environment through our mitochondria to give physiologic power to the tissues in our body that allowed us to turn these computers on. To me, that's how I look at Bitcoin. It's a very fundamental thing that will lead to an organism, probably in your lifetime, probably not mine. I'll be already dead. And your kids and my kids, what they'll be talking about with cryptocurrencies, I think in 40, 50, 60 years will be radically different. The generations and iterations that we're all going to go through are going to be amazing. But do I think the things that are buried in Nakamoto's white paper will be fundamental to the idea that most important things will be built around the ideas that are in the Bitcoin white paper? I believe that's the case. And I believe that's exactly the same case that's happened in biology. The single most important thing that biology has built, probably in, I would say, since the Cambrian explosion, which was probably 600 million years ago, 650 million years, right around there, is the ability to transform energy. And it's the circadian mechanism. It's the light and dark cycle. And it's so simple. When you hear it, people probably hearing this go, wait a minute, you're going to say that it's this germane? Turns out, Nobel Prize was given for circadian biology in 2017. Most people don't know that. When your circadian biology is off, you can't live a proper life. You get sick. You die early. That's fundamentally what happened to, some of the heroes that you guys probably have in this podcast, like a guy like Steve Jobs or a guy like Paul Allen, who used to own the Seahawks and was, part of Microsoft. That's how powerful that story is. So is that the reason why I show probably favorite of Bitcoin versus, say, Ethereum, Polkadot, Cardano, Monero? You name the coin, you name the protocol. I don't look at them probably the way other people look at them.
Yeah. Well, and that's okay. I mean, Bitcoin was really the first, and it really stands apart. I do enjoy following some of the other altcoins more so for kind of the problems that they're trying to solve. But if we're going to be honest, there's very few projects that are actually doing something promising. But we'll see. It's still early on, but I do tend to agree with you that it's like evolution. And when you were talking about thermodynamics of currencies and the thermodynamics of our bodies, I'm sure most people probably don't. It's kind of going over a lot of people's heads. They're probably thinking of the cost of electricity to power Bitcoin, and how recently in the news, Elon Musk tweeted about how it's not environmentally safe, and then China started to ban mining because of different reasons, and we saw the price dip, almost $30,000. And I almost wonder if there was, this may be a bit conspiratorial, but a lot of entities for years now have wanted Bitcoin to fail, and it's not easy to do. It's kind of like trying to boil the ocean. But another time I spoke to a guy years ago, and he said, what's to stop some big whale investor from buying up Bitcoin and crashing it? And I thought, well, that's really not easy to do. But more and more Bitcoin.
That kind of question comes from somebody who's pretty misinformed about what Bitcoin is.
Right.
I would just tell you that when you understand the energy FUD that's out there, and I don't like going in the weeds on conspiracy theory, but I will tell you that when you understand fundamentally what Bitcoin stands for, it stands for monetization of time and freedom. Any government that is authoritarian, which China is, of course, is going to hate Bitcoin. I'll even take it a step further. It's part of the reason why the U.S. Federal Reserve hates Bitcoin. It's part of the reason why Yellen hates Bitcoin, and Robert Rubin and Bernanke and Greenspan. There's a reason for that. The Federal Reserve is not part of the federal government. It's owned by shareholders that have, how shall we say, modus operandi is different than the American public. And it turns out that the executive branch and the congressional branch in the United States have been basically a puppet at the end of the banker's strings and in between those strings since 1971, when gold was removed. The industrial military complex has been the only backing of the currency. So that's given the bankers complete control of both the political and the industrial military complex. The key is that people still have the power. The power of the vote is still important. The problem is, Ethan, the power of the vote is not being used by the people because the people have been disintermediated by what I call fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's born from the bankers, born from the politicians, born from their arms. In other words, there has to be executioners of the plan, meaning who is protecting the bank at a fundamental level. That's where you have to understand how the tentacles reach into companies like Vanguard and BlackRock, how they're linked back to the World Economic Forum, how the World Economic Forum is tied to BIS, the IMF, and the Federal Reserve. And then if you really want to get into an interesting discussion, then I think you need to go all the way back to Jekyll Island and understand what really happened in 1913 and where the government initially got their gold. That came from the Chinese dragon families. And why didn't the Chinese dragon families take that money back? Well, they tried to, but turns out when the United States got stronger over the next 50, 60, 70 years, that gold was stolen. And Ethan, you may be shocked to hear this, but if you know how to do any research on Pacer, which is tied to the legal profession, you'll find out that in 2009, two Japanese nationals were caught at the border of Italy with over $1 trillion in bonds that were registered at the Federal Reserve and registered in BIS in Zurich. And guess where that money came from? It came from the Chinese dragon families that are trying to recapture their gold. See, they have to have legal precedent in the old system, which is controlled by the central bankers, controlled by the 8 families that make up the octagon above the BIS. And this story has been relatively buried since 2009. When you understand just how bad this is, how did I find out about all this? You'll probably be surprised about this, Ethan. You think it's probably on the finance side, but it turns out it's not. You know about the dietary guidelines in the United States. You know that I have a huge problem with the people at Harvard University in terms of how the food pyramid was constructed. You'll be shocked to find out the same people that constructed the food pyramid for all of us to eat, which fundamentally made us rely more on the middlemen, which is big pharma, actually were the same people that are tied to the story about money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely believe it. I mean, either road you go down, finance or the medical industry, kind of post-Rockefeller, you kind of come to the same conclusions, which is really why I was really excited to talk to you because, I mean, you're like the perfect person to lay this out.
Well, I mean, I know the history on both sides, and I think the problem is, like you started this conversation where you called it conspiracy theory. It's not conspiracy theory when the data is out there. The problem really becomes, it goes back to a quote that Noam Chomsky made a long time ago. And he said, if you can limit the discussion on a topic to a specific area and you don't let it go anywhere else, you basically can control people. That's fundamentally what they did in Nazi Germany as well. And fear is one of the best ways to control a population. The key is social media makes it really easy to take people who are doing the leading edge research and make them look like they're fools when they're really not. And that's the problem for people who are very thoughtful and do their homework, I've had to face this in medicine because the real problem in medicine actually starts with those guys who broke up Standard Oil and founded Big Pharma. That's the reason why Standard Oil, for those of you who don't know, is based in New Jersey. And that's the same reason why Big Pharma, most of their companies, are also incorporated in New Jersey today. They are the breakup companies of Standard Oil. One of the problems really becomes, until you truly understand how this link is made and why it's tied to money and how these people cross-reference each other. Now, to make it simple, they now own the media. They own NBC, ABC, Fox, the same company. The number one shareholder on both sides is Vanguard and BlackRock. BlackRock is trying to finish the job that Lehman Brothers began in 2008. Most of you remember that's the subprime mortgage. Well, BlackRock's going out right now and buying a ton of real estate so that guys like Ethan, who are young, are probably not even Ethan. I would say Ethan's children and maybe my kids, so that they won't be able to afford a home down the road because they're going to try to centralize everything. Anytime you centralize any network, you're putting a middleman in between you and the truth. And in medicine, that truth is a prescription pen. Why did that happen in medicine? It's pretty simple. They gave us a total focus on RNA and DNA, and they didn't tell us about the other genome in the cell, which is the mitochondria. And it turns out the mitochondria wholly 100%. This is not conspiracy at all in biology. 100% it focuses on making energy in the cell. So if you really understand what RNA and DNA do, it's just the blueprint of the cell, but without the mitochondrial DNA, the blueprint is worthless. And I want you to think about that for a minute. And when you really understand that, because that was the conundrum I came up to 16 years ago, I said, you know what? I need to know more about mitochondria than I do about RNA and DNA. Because it turns out without energy, the blueprint doesn't matter. Well, since 1953 with Watson and Crick, my profession has had a myopic focus on RNA and DNA. And you know who that benefited? The guys that ran the Federal Reserve and the guys that created Big Pharma from the breakup of Standard Oil under Teddy Roosevelt's administration. So the key is, if I can get people focused in on the proper thermodynamics, in other words, know everything you can know about mitochondria, and then you'll realize why medicine's gone off the rails, why we have chronic disease epidemics that we can't solve. We're really good at taking care of, acute things. You get in a car wreck, you break your leg, you get a subdural hematoma. We got that. But, when it comes to fixing diabetes, obesity, and opiate dependence, we suck. We're terrible. And it's because we've lost the focus on what we should be on. I would tell you the same thing has gone on with the American public. Why are we debasing our currency right now? Why are we devaluing? Why are we heading to a hyperinflation scenario? Because the American public has been divided along ideologic lines left and right. And the ultimate irony is, when it's all said and done and your money is stolen by these people, because it's coming, just like it happened in 2008, you're going to realize, both on the left and the right, that was the stupidest thing in the world, because they're both crooks and they both protect the guys at the Federal Reserve and the BIS. And until we change the system, this is the reason why I tell people Bitcoin is a peaceful revolution. Every time you buy Bitcoin, you short the central bank. Every time you buy Bitcoin, you get my belief that a change in medicine is possible. That's how strong I believe in this situation.
Well, that's excellent. And I apologize if I use the term conspiracy theory. I'm not a really big fan of that term. But, like you very well laid out, there are entities that do conspire to benefit themselves and not the everyday people. And when we're talking about our health, that's like the most private, intimate part that we can look after. And I'm just wondering if you know of any existing decentralized medical systems, and if there's not one, how would you like to see that set up?
Well, that's what I run at my center. My Kruse Longevity Center is a fully decentralized network. I call it decentralized medicine. I shorten it, just like you guys shorten DeFi from decentralized finance. I call it DMed. I would tell you mitochondrial medicine is really decentralized medicine. Why? Because it gets you focusing on the thing that matters, and there's no middleman. There won't be big pharma between me and you. When I tell Ethan that his problem is this, just for argument's sake, this addiction that you have to, say, LED light bulbs, if I can move you to red LED lights and candles, you could improve, say, the thickness of your retina, your hormones, and I can explain to you over, say, an hour or two, because you can't spend an hour or two with your doc in California, can you, Ethan? That $50 copay only takes you so far, doesn't it? But guess what? With me, you're going to learn all of these things. You're going to come to learn to understand how light, water, and magnetism are the three key environmental cues that your mitochondria pays attention to keep you away from my profession. And I think everybody listening to this podcast probably knows that when you get sick, it's the single most expensive thing that could ever happen to your life. Why? Because it robs you not only of your money, but I would say your ability to do your job, your ability to think. And if you don't have those faculties, you're not going to be worth anything, not only to yourself, but to an employer, or even if you're an entrepreneur, to your own business. It becomes extremely difficult to do. So this is another way that health and wealth are fundamentally, linked at the core. And I think the healthier you stay, the more productive you can be. Really, it comes down to a productivity answer. And I think most people on the business side understand that. The problem is most people on the business side don't understand how biology plays into their business plan. And I want to change that. So decentralized medicine is one of the things that I've been building for 16, 17 years. For example, people that hire me to be their doctor, they get offered, you can pay me in fiat or you can pay me in cryptocurrency. If you pay me in cryptocurrency, I give you a 25% discount.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, that was one of the questions that Sarah had. So, and something that I heard you say on another podcast was, it's really important to build wealth now to compound and take care of your health in the future. And a lot of folks probably think, maybe they're afraid to get into cryptocurrency because of the volatility, but that they're really kind of missing the point. It's more of a
I'll tell you why they're really missing the point. And this is one of those counterintuitive things I'm going to tell you, because I haven't said this publicly on a podcast, but I'll say it now because it's the appropriate time to talk about it with Bitcoin trading where it's at. Do you realize that the Sharpe ratio of Bitcoin is now below what the 60-40 portfolio is, bonds to equities? Everybody on Wall Street believes, including what's published in Dalio's books, that the 60-40 portfolio is a big deal. If you look at the 12-year history of the 60-40 portfolio and Bitcoin, Bitcoin right now has a lower Sharpe ratio than that. And here's the crazy thing. The compound annual growth rate of the 60-40 portfolio is 10.3%. You know what it is for Bitcoin? 233%. So when you say it's volatile, here's the problem. People that say that haven't done their homework. It turns out what Wall Street is pushing down your throat is far more volatile and far less profitable. And the reason why people don't understand this is because guess what? They don't understand what a decentralized network fundamentally means. Thermodynamically, it's the archetype of nature. It is the most efficient network out there. That's why I tried to lead the podcast off with you about the slime. Slime was able to save the Japanese government millions of dollars in design. And I guess what I'm saying to you is when you realize that the Bitcoin monetary network thermodynamically has no leaks, it's got a fixed supply, it's immutable, it's not been broken by any bad actor. It doesn't take a huge leap once you truly understand what you're dealing with to say, you know what, I need to put more of my store of value in that network long term, because long term it's going to play off. The only people, Ethan, that have a good argument against this are people who are short-term traders. Those people, I don't spend too much of my time dealing with. That's kind of like, I'll try to give you the correlate. That would be like Kurt Cobain coming to see me the last year of his life while he's on his benders and doing heroin and this and that. He goes, but this is what I'm doing. I'm trading time for money. I'm like, dude, go ahead. You can do it. We all know how that ended. Do I see the same story in Steve Jobs? Yeah. Everybody in California, where you're at now, thinks Steve Jobs is a great guy. Well, how good is he if he wasn't good enough for himself? Wasn't good enough for his kids? He's dead at 56. That's how he defined success, just because he made billions of dollars making technology. To me, if you're not alive and kicking, that's a fundamental failure. It tells me that the value system that people have for people is markedly altered. And here's where we get to the big point that I want to make to you. I want to be very provocative when I say this. The single number one thing that's brilliant in Bitcoin is the same thing that's brilliant in biology. It actually creates time for you. That's the real point between the compound annual growth rate return between the 60-40 portfolio and Bitcoin. How much time, Ethan, could you create if you were in Bitcoin in 2010? Just say you invested $10,000 at that time. You'd be a billionaire right now. Do you think you'd have to have a podcast doing the things you're doing now? No. You'd be able to do whatever you want. You'd have ultimate freedom. You'd have ultimate time to maybe spend that money on the things that matter the most, the big questions. Why is it the NIH spends 98% of their budget on RNA and DNA research and spends only 1% on mitochondrial DNA? Maybe I'll take one of my billions of dollars and go support researchers who actually solve a real problem that we all care about. Because it turns out the most valuable asset we have, Ethan, is time. It's not money. And that's the mistake people in the investing world make. They constantly trade time for money. And what Bitcoin and biology fundamentally do, and I would say mitochondria, is they are there to optimize your time if you plug into the decentralized network. And I think it's I don't believe people talk about this enough when it comes to Bitcoin. I think that's the single most important thing that it does for people who are plugged into that network. Time is the key. And if you're worried about Bitcoin going from 65 to 30, that tells me that you really don't get it. I can tell you, I lived through a time when Amazon went and lost 85% of its value. But did I sell it then? No. If you held it right now, you're kicking ass and taking names. And the problem is, I remember in 1999, probably when you were a little kid, Bill Miller going on CNBC and absolutely getting skewered by Mark Haynes, Maria Bartiromo, David Faber, and Joe Kernan that you can't buy Amazon. They just sell books. And he kept saying, you don't understand. Amazon's not just going to sell books. You're paying for this network they're building. I got news for you. If a book network and a consumer network is worth what Amazon's worth now, can you imagine when the world wakes up and realizes that we have a monetary network, something that you don't have to convince anybody of. Everybody likes money. And now we have a monetary network that stores it through space and time, where no bad actor like the Federal Reserve or Jerome Powell or Janet Yellen or some fucking general wants to start a war. They can't affect Ethan's family. They can't affect your wife, Sarah. The only way they're going to affect you is if you keep denominating your life in fiat, in a debt instrument that actually trades time for money. That's fundamentally why you get into Bitcoin. Once you understand that, you could give a rat's ass when it goes from 65 to 30. In fact, I've told my entire tribe, when it goes down like this, sprinkle more white powder and buy more of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a good opportunity. And, a lot of people, it's kind of their introduction is, hey, this is something I can make money at. And then they learn about money itself. And then it's kind of like, it blows their mind wide open.
Well, I would tell people, if you look at a year ago today, a year ago today, Bitcoin was traded at $9,000. We're at right now $34,000. Tell me how in any universe that's bad. But yet the people are out there say, yeah, but it was 65. Now it's 34. Well, people that are in this spaceship that are traveling 5, 10, 15, 20 years, because that's the real reason you want to own it. It's a store of value over space and time. not a store of value over 6 months. That's what a trader does. That's what Kurt Cobain did with his life. That's what Steve Jobs did with his life. I'm going to say that's what Paul Allen did with his life. Do you want to be like them, or do you want to be like Gene Calment, who lived to 122.4 years old? Do you want to maximize your time? Well, then if you do, then you fundamentally understand how Jean Calment did it. She spent her entire life in the south of France, living outside, never got in a car. She was always out in nature, always plugged into the decentralized network that mitochondria need. Maybe somebody listening to this will say, I think I understand now why Jack likes Bitcoin so much, because if I plug into that network, maybe someday I can move out of the inner city in Los Angeles and go buy Jean Calment's house where she lived to 122 years old. Maybe I don't have to live in a city like Los Angeles that has 3 straight years of declining longevity. Maybe I can go get some time back because I plugged into the right thermodynamic network, kind of like the slime did in Japan.
Well, I totally agree. This is very exciting. Doing a podcast on technology, it's almost like a lot of people I talk to, and no offense to them, because I definitely am guilty of this too. We kind of have our heads in the sand, but there's so much stupid use of technology that doesn't benefit our bodies, but we think is such a great idea. And maybe we'll get there where it's both beneficial.
Ethan, you're going to help people get there. I'm just going to tell you, because your podcast doesn't focus in on this stuff, the fact that you're doing this right now and you're opening up a new audience to the science of nature that's decentralized. I truly hope that your audience understands that crypto ties directly to health. I want them all to use their crypto winnings to improve their health. Why? Because I believe out of your generation, see, my generation built the cell phone, we built the internet, we built the foundation, but it's going to be your generation that has to do it right. Right now, you're out in I think a fork in the road. And I think you doing this podcast and opening people up to these ideas is the first step of a journey of 1,000 miles. And I think we do need to continue to be provocative. Why? Because being provocative stokes curiosity. And when we stoke curiosity, we ask better questions of ourselves. Is it wise to be tethered to our technology 24/7? Well, it doesn't take the person who lives in California too long to look down at their Mac and say, didn't work so great for Steve Jobs, and it certainly didn't work great for Paul Allen. Maybe I need to rethink about this a little bit differently. Look, we can still use technology to do amazing things. I mean, think about what me and you are doing right now. We're using the internet to bridge the gap, to bring this kind of information. My information clearly is new to your audience. You and your wife have been following me on the biology side for a while, but do I think this is a huge opportunity for people to understand? You need to realize everybody has this positive connotation with tech. Well, tech doesn't always have a positive connotation when it comes to biology. I just want people to know how to use the technology to keep their store of value of their time biologically by staying alive longer so that they could be the next change agent, for our species, to make the right decision on that path that we're on right now. There's somebody out there. I always say this when I go give a talk anywhere in the world, or even when I do a podcast. I am speaking to one person out there. That one person may change all of our lives. That's all that matters.
Yeah, well, that's powerful. And I know we're getting to the end of our time here, and I'm really grateful for you to do this so long with me. But there is one thing that Sarah and I have kind of been talking about the last few days, a comment you wrote about sitting in a car and how it affects our mitochondria. And I thought you may have been referring to an electric vehicle with magnetic fields, because I always wonder what...
Any car with steel belts.
What's going on there?
Well, the first thing you have to know is every tire that's manufactured in the world has steel belts in it. And most people learned about Michael Faraday. If you don't remember Michael Faraday, he's the one that almost all of Tesla's technology is based on, where you can induce an electric field when you have a moving current. Well, it turns out when a tire rotates, that metal in there is rotating and creates an electric and magnetic field. That electric and magnetic field actually change the free radical signaling of your mitochondria when you're in there. Why? Because the car has no shielding. That's the problem. So when you spend a lot of time, especially since now I know you live in California, just go on the 5 and sit out there and look at all those people that travel an hour or two each way to work. You know what that means? For 4 hours a day, they don't realize they're in a biologic prison. They have no idea something that they look at that improves their lives, getting them to and from work, actually is harming them as they do it, stealing their time. That's the same story that I would tell you is when they go to work and they put their fiat money in the bank account, allowing BlackRock and say the Bank of New York or Wells Fargo to steal their fiat value by printing more money through the M2 supply. Isn't that the same story? It is. Thermodynamically, it's the same story. But you know what, Ethan, I need people to understand that. And, doing a podcast like this with you, hopefully we're able to put some Windex on some people's glass eyes.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm sure for many, this is their first introduction to any of this. I'm sure there's a few that did get angry. But I encourage you, if you're still listening, to go down the rabbit hole with us, because it's very rewarding. So, Dr. Kruse, I just want to thank you very much for coming on the show. If there's anything you'd like to leave us with, links people can go to learn more, connect with you, potentially utilize your services, please share it with us.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you heard anything here, you're interested, you can find me on social media. Just look Dr. Jack Kruse. I'm pretty much everywhere. I've got free articles on LinkedIn, probably about 120 of them. On my Patreon blog, again, it's patreon.com/Dr. Jack Kruse. I've got literally hundreds. The current series that I'm in now is all about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, the history behind it, how it links to some of the things that you heard in this podcast. I also have a TV program called Quantum Health TV, where I really talk a lot about mitochondrial biology, and you can go to Quantum Health TV and find that out. If you want to read some of my older work, especially tied to food, I have a book on Amazon called the Epipaleo RX. I also have an old blog on my jackkruse.com website that goes through leptin biology. That actually tells you how I jumped down the rabbit hole of the decentralized network, how I figured out that a company in California was trying to hurt us all, a company you guys may have heard of called Amgen, when they canceled some leptin trials. And that's actually what got me to jump down this rabbit hole when I realized that I was being lied to by a middleman. Those are probably good places to start. And, I've done hundreds of podcasts. Most of them are on the biology side. Some of them really get deep in the weeds. I would tell any of your listeners, if they want to listen to probably two of the classic ones, if you put my name in a Google box and go to YouTube and put Vermont 2016 and 2017, you'll be rewarded with a description in 2016 of actually what food really is. It's an electromagnetic barcode of photosynthesis as the Earth travels around the sun. And probably the one that'll blow your mind the most is probably Vermont 2017, when I explained to you the basis of quantum biology and how your mitochondria really work with light. It's a story about your eye and your skin that I guarantee you haven't heard anywhere else. And the reason you haven't is doctors don't have enough time with your copay to explain this to you. But I did on YouTube, and it's free, and you can look at it, and then you can decide whether I'm crazy or maybe I'm looking under stones that we all should be looking under.
Absolutely. I remember the first time I listened to you talk about those very topics. I was painting a house, and I almost fell off the ladder. It's a moment I won't forget, and it's one of those things where you can decide to ignore it or just pick up your feet and go downstream with the current. If anybody is into cryptocurrencies and they're willing to do the work to get involved with Bitcoin, if they can get a wallet, they can. You can do this, and I think that their lives will be rewarded. Dr. Kruse, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I'm sorry that Sarah wasn't able to chime in. She was on the chat a little bit, but we're just so grateful. And I just want to wish you a good rest of your day, and thanks again.
Hey, no problem. Anytime.
Don't forget, get 20% off and free shipping with the code blockchain at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use blockchain as the promo code. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
So speaking of our sponsor, Manscaped just launched their 4th generation trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. Join over 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code blockchain at manscaped.com. Sarah, I know you don't have balls, but you know people who do.
No, I like ball stories. Tell me a ball story.
Well, imagine shaving with a sleek, well-designed, and optimized trimmer.
I just can't.
That makes shaving time your favorite time in the bathroom. It's true. You may laugh, but I've used it. Some people have their thing. I'm not embarrassed to say that I am one of the first people to try the new 4.0, the lawnmower, that is. And I'm blown away by the performance. The craftsmanship and details on the 4.0 are next level. So, I know I've told you this story before, but do you remember that red grooming tool I bought?
I know the one.
From a local
Yes.
pharmacy. It was the kind that I plugged into the wall.
It's already scary.
I cut myself pretty bad with that.
Oh, golly, gee.
My nutsack blood came spilling out.
Oh, nut blood. You never want to see the nut blood. Never.
No, there's a lot of important things
It's so
going on down there.
precious. Family jewels are in there.
So I didn't do any below-the-waist trimming since then, and that's been several years.
You were
until,
scarred.
oh yeah, I probably was. Until Manscaped sent me their lawnmower.
Their next level.
Yeah, I don't have to worry about cutting my ball sack open anymore. It really is cool. It's a great product, and they have really good soaps and good smells.
I do like that. I'm going to be honest. I am not a big fan of colognes or perfumes and stuff. In fact, I'm quite sensitive to it, and sometimes I can smell it's toxic. I like the smell of this. It smells like a man from World War II or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like a manly smell.
If you like the technology, they've got all sorts of fun things like wireless charging, the 4000K LED spotlight. Like other methods are available, such as they have razors, and there's a lot to buy on their site. They've got really soft boxers. It's hard for me to find boxers that I like, but theirs are very soft. They've got shirts, like we mentioned, the cologne.
I like that little kit, that little grooming kit. That's very nice.
Yeah.
They're good on presentation.
Yeah, they are. So, men, if you've been shaving with the same nut trimmer on your face, you've been doing it wrong.
Yeah, stop doing that.
Nobody wants to end up with pubes on their mouth, but I'm more concerned about the different types of bacteria mingling with your face. Anyways, take advantage of this limited time offer, 20% off and free shipping with the code blockchain at manscaped.com, and your balls will thank you.